Welcome to Creativo Corner. I am Abby, and we have a very special guest with us here today in LA. We have an artist from our Milken event that we did back in May here in Los Angeles. Amy Tai is an artist represented by Artspace Warehouse here in Los Angeles, and she has some really beautiful work that is very whimsical, very dreamy, also very feminist. So she has many different subject matters that she broaches in a very, very beautiful way. Her art has done very well here in Los Angeles. She's been doing a number of shows the past few years here and also in New York. She's also an elementary art school teacher, so she has that youthful perspective from working with the students on a regular basis. So without further ado, we have Amy Tai here. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you. I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you for inviting me onto your podcast. Hello, everyone.
Absolutely. So, Amy, you've lived in a few different places. You've lived in New York, most recently, LA now. You lived in Asia when you were younger. What's your art origin story? How were you inspired to start creating?
That's a really great question. So I was born in Taiwan, and I moved to London when I was in elementary school, and then I also moved to Oregon after that, then New York in my adult life. So my origin story starts actually from my father. My dad inspired me to make art when I was a kid. My childhood was very kind of tumultuous. My parents didn't really get along very well. They eventually got divorced, but it was a very kind of volatile environment at home. But during that time, my father also struggled with alcoholism. But despite all of that, all the challenges he experienced, one thing I noticed when I was a kid was when my dad was drawing or painting or creating art, he was calm. He was so focused. He was so at peace. And so I really took note of that as a kid. And it was something that relaxed him, and I felt like it was a safe space for him. And he wasn't he didn't do art in his career. He was in manufacturing business, and so it wasn't something that he went to school for. So art was purely a hobby. And I would sit next to him as he painted the mountainous landscapes that we lived in Taiwan. And those moments with my father, watching him paint and draw and me drawing beside him, really, bonded us. And it also made me see art in a different light, not just purely creative or expressive a function, but as a therapeutic function for my father. And so I took notice. I started to draw, paint, sculpt whenever I had a chance, at school, at home. And eventually my parents got divorced, and then I moved to London with my mother. And my father, was kind of in the toughest phase of his life. The alcoholism kind of exacerbated, but we still kept in touch. And in the early 90s, emails weren't a thing yet. International phone calls were expensive. And so my father and I actually faxed each other drawings during this time. So I would fax him some drawings, and he would, fax back his drawings and his commentary on my drawings. And that carried on for a good 4 or 5 years I was in England. And then later on, I had moved to Oregon. But what I noticed that no matter how hard I tried to fit in, it was hard, from having experienced different cultures and coming into a third new culture. But what I noticed was that art once again grounded me. Whenever I had a drawing project in class, the kids would take notice that I had an art skill, that I was able to draw well. And it gave me a boost in confidence and my self-esteem, and it helped me feel the sense of security and my identity more. And so later on, when I was applying for college, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to art school because art's been my passion for so long, and my aunt was quite supportive of me taking art classes outside of school. But with most, well, I don't want to generalize, but because my aunt and uncle, my family were immigrants, with the Chinese and Taiwanese culture, during that time, they didn't really see the value in terms of monetary value in pursuing a career in art. Because my family during that time, none of them, had experience pursuing an art career or in design. And so it was really kind of a new thing for a child in the family, an immigrant child in a family, to say, I want to pursue art. And so my aunt was very kind of iron fist about it. She said, no, what are you going to do with an art degree with art school? You're not going to make money. How are you going to put food on the table?
Yeah, that's true.
Which I totally get their perspective. But she was very adamant about preventing me from going into the arts, to the point where I wasn't even allowed to apply for art school. And she would monitor the applications, the college applications I was mailing out, to make sure that it wasn't, an art oriented school. And yeah, that really kind of shattered my heart. It really did impact me in a really kind of resentful, I will say, way. But later on, I pursued something else that I felt passionate about, which was teaching. And I went and worked with children that, when I pursued teaching, I moved to New York City to get to go to grad school to pursue my teaching certification and degree. I wanted to work with children from immigrant backgrounds and children who come from, backgrounds where they face many of the similar challenges that I grew up with. And so I was content, being a teacher for a number of years, but I never stopped making art. I would always make art on the weekends. I would draw, I would paint, I would experiment. And many of my students, who were from, a lot of very challenging backgrounds, really struggled with not only cultural identity, but also poverty, and fitting in and learning a new language, learning English. I had a lot of ELL students, and art was also, I saw, a really therapeutic outlet for them whenever we would do art projects. And so that part of me, realized I need to figure out a way to combine my two passions, my passion for art and my passion for teaching kids. And so I did it all myself. I was working full-time as a teacher and went back to school full-time as well to get my art teaching degree. And so I got to go to art school and take all the classes that I never got to. And then I became an art teacher. And then having been able to take art classes again, I was able to kind of get in network with a community of creatives, and they kind of really, my professors, my friends that I made in the art classes I took, they really helped shape my art style and eventually develop my art style through my years later on to where I'm at now. And so and that's when I started taking art seriously, and and fast forward to today, I kind of am at a place where I'm really happy in terms of having, people who do appreciate my art. Shout out to Artspace Warehouse Gallery to also represent me because of what they saw in my art. And so, yeah, so that's kind of, I know I'm kind of long with it.
Fascinating. But I mean, you had the background, and then you had more of a formal training when you went back to school.
Right.
And that's really when you found your voice.
Right, exactly.
Oh, cool, cool. And where did you go to school for your art teaching?
I went to Queens College.
Oh, awesome.
So my So my undergrad I did at University of Oregon, and then my grad school I went to Columbia University for teaching, and then I went to Queens College for the art courses I took.
Wow, very accomplished, Amy.
Oh, thank you.
That's awesome. And you have a very like whimsical and dreamy style. Do you think this is like kind of from the landscapes of Taiwan? Like where did that come from?
That's such a great question. So my relationship with my dreams and sleep is one that is very complex. So as a kid, I used to fall asleep like very randomly. I would like be eating dinner and I would face plant in my bowl after an hour. I would fall asleep standing up, singing in choir in high school. I would fall asleep, even in New York City on the subways. I fell asleep a lot in very kind of unexpected places. And I didn't know why that was happening until college, where I couldn't stay awake during lectures, which I know most of us can't when, depending on the class. But it was like every lecture, every paper I used to have to write in college, I used to fall asleep. I couldn't get through even a sentence, on my laptop. And I realized that there is something up with my relationship with sleep. Because as a child, all the way up until as an adult, I remember every single dream I have. And I dream at least, every other night. And I remember dreams as far back when I was 4 or 5 years old. And they're vivid and they're tangible. I can hear, smell, feel, the physicality of my dreams are so tangible. And so, but, my falling asleep was starting to interfere with everything I was doing in college and in my studies. And so I went to a sleep doctor. And I was diagnosed with narcolepsy. Sleep apnea is a big thing. But one thing that used to occur a lot that really kind of instigated my creative ideas were not only like my dreams, but this transition between reality and my dream state. And so, for example, in college, I would study a lot in the library, and I would, look at, a bookshelf or something, and I would doze off. And as I'm dozing off, I would see what they call hypnagogic hallucinations, which basically means the things that you see in your dream state start to be combined with reality and what you see. And so I would see, like, one time I saw like the flying animals just like dancing on the bookshelf that I'm visually still looking at in my waking state. And so that kind of transition period between falling asleep, between reality and dream state is called hypnagogic hallucinations. And so a lot of my ideas would come from that time frame. And sometimes, these hallucinations would be, just 1 minute or 2 minutes. But eventually, as an adult, they became longer. Like the longest one I've had was probably like 4 hours.
Whoa.
Which, yeah, as an adult, they're rare, but, and I remember the one night I had where that was like the longest period I've ever had, and I kind of jolted myself up in the middle of the night, got my sketchbook, and I started painting exactly what I was seeing, which were these like amorphous blob shapes, very abstract, organic shapes and different color palettes that I was seeing. And then I painted it, and they almost reminded me of like sushi shapes. As like very random, and I have a lot of food dreams. I'll admit, I'm a big foodie, but they were like abstract sushi shapes. I didn't think too much of it, and eventually I posted on social media, and then I made prints of them, and then it became this like one of my like most popular prints that people buy from my online print store. And it became like what propelled me into like painting more and taking art seriously in my adult life. So what's interesting is that Salvador Dali used to also do the same thing. He's a surrealist artist who was obviously inspired by his dreams. He would sit on a chair with an object in his hand and a sketchbook next to him, and he would doze off, and then the object would fall, make a sound, jolt him awake, and at that waking moment, he would draw exactly what he saw because it was fresh from that hypnagogic hallucination and draw that down. And so I'm like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that Dali they also did something, that I had something similar to what Dali did, but unintentionally, that it came to me. And so dreams are so, I feel like they tap into parts of our subconscious that are so authentic, that are uninhibited. And I'm into symbolism. And so I have this book all on, it's called the Book of Symbols, that I do a lot of dream interpretation on, and because I do dream a lot of, sometimes it's like repeated symbols I see, repeated animals, repeated scenarios, and I would interpret them and use them as inspiration for my art. Like my painting, there was a phase where I was dreaming a lot about serpents and snakes, and so that was one integration of that. Fish, koi fish, dream a lot of koi fish. That's also incorporated into my art. Yeah. Occasional food dreams. I love the food dreams. They're my absolute favorite, by the way. I mean,
can you taste it?
Yes. And the most frustrating ones are like in the dream I was at a restaurant, and they're like the food is on your table, and then you're about to dig in, and then the alarm goes off, and you're like, dang it, I was about to dig into the pasta,
That's funny. Wow. So your most popular print is of sushi?
It's called the Sushi Dream. Yeah, okay. And you can find it in my online print shop. It's funny because it's very abstract, and the color is actually very pastel like, and it does look somewhat like a woodcut print, and it's repeated patterns, and it's very meditative, and so it does kind of parallel with the dream state a lot. But yeah, people like that one.
Wow.
And it just so happened to be sushi.
Yeah. I love it. Well, my personally favorite of yours is the one where it's like a kind of like a country. You know which one it is. It's the one with the cat. So it's like a table, and there's like a freshly baked pie. I don't know if it's freshly baked, but it looks like it is. And there's like this little cat that's kind of just like peeping over the windowsill behind the pie, like, I want to eat it. So what inspired that one? Did you actually see the cat, or the cat was in the dream? That was an actual scene that you saw in your dream?
That's a really
Were you eating
question.
The pie?
Well, yes. I mean, I think the food elements, I do see a lot of those in my dreams. But that painting is the most recent. That's the newest painting that I worked on. It was displayed at Artspace Warehouse. A collector friend of mine, a close friend of mine, recently bought that painting, and that is actually the new direction I'm heading into for my new series of paintings. That one is inspired by a lot of my childhood growing up in two cultures. Going home to Taiwanese, Chinese, cultural foods and beliefs system, and then when I was living in Oregon, we lived in the suburbs, and then going outside into this very Americana suburb and going to school, and it was that kind of dichotomy of having to live in two different kind of cultural spaces, and that switching between the two cultural spaces was a lot like code switching. And so I wanted, as an adult and reflection of my identity as an Asian American female, I wanted my art to embody more of that upbringing with also the dreamlike aspects. And so the food is food from the Taiwanese culture. There's egg tarts, which has a Portuguese origin, but Taiwan used to be a colony of Portugal, actually. And then there's the lychee. But then when you look at the outside, it's a very kind of American suburb, very traditional American suburb landscape, which, that's definitely inspired by my Oregon upbringing. And the cat. Yeah.
The cat is so curious, by the way. We'll put it in the video, but like the cat is so curious. It's like, ooh.
Yes.
Yeah.
I did have dreams about like a lot of dogs and cats during a certain phase of my life, but that cat is an actual cat that used to just, I feel like it was stalking me in my yard. It would like peek its face through the window. It would be in the yard. It would,
Oh, wow.
it always appeared. I mean, like aside from appearing in reality, it would appear in my dreams. And so that was capturing part of reality, definitely. But if you zoom in, you'll see a little spaceship in the sky in the background of like a person being abducted, and that I would say that that's like the tiny surrealist like dot at the end that I added, where adding that kind of person being abducted at a UFO also kind of had the symbolism of when I was growing up, it did feel like it had a hard time fitting in to two cultural spaces. You know, I wasn't always, you know, why can't I be both? Why do I have to pick? I'm this or that. Like, you know, the Asian community a lot of times would be like, well, you know, you don't, you know, if you're too Americanized, then they call you like a banana, or which is like you're yellow on the outside, white on the inside.
I've heard that before.
Right, you know, and then if you're if you're only comfortable in Asian spaces, then there's also that other perspective of like, well, you know, and so like I felt like I didn't want to have to pick one space that I felt only safe in. I wanted to feel like I could be in more than one space and feel like I belonged. And so that painting does also capture the fact that like that little UFO being abducting a person, feeling like I don't feel like I belong in any space. I feel like I belong in outer space. I just want to be abducted into a different space where I don't feel like I have to pick one or the other. We're not, you know, the feeling of not being able to fit in is, and like, why do we have to fit in? You know, why can't I exist in multiple spaces and feel comfortable in multiple spaces? So that there's multiple layers to that painting.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also like an interesting component where you felt comfortable enough in every space to fall asleep. So
Yeah, that is so true. New York subway, at a restaurant.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, but that's so true. I think we do need. I'd like to talk about like the feminists, the feminist messages in some of your paintings.
Yeah.
Another one of my favorites is like you have a rose, which is really beautiful, but it has like women's bodies inside kind of like tanks.
Yeah.
Inside the petals of the rose, and it's like this very beautiful, like almost like feminine type painting. But then when you look closer, all of your work has like you were mentioning with like the UFO and you know the cat and the egg tarts. Like there's a lot of hidden meaning. So let's talk about the rose, like the feminist versus like the tanks, the women's bodies, like like that. That's also a different series, right?
Yeah,
different
yeah.
series from the cat.
Exactly. Yeah, it's an older series. An older one from a few years back, and it's very female forward. And that painting specifically, you know, with symbolism that relates to flowers, like Georgia O'Keeffe, you know, used the floral symbol so much repetitively, abstractly in her art. So many female artists use flowers as a symbol for femininity. But for me, it was, you know, when I first painted that painting, I was a little bit self-conscious about how people would interpret it. As soon as they see like a flower and tanks, and then they instantly probably want to politicize the art. And then I was afraid that, oh, what would I be like seen as a political artist? And I mean, there's definitely, I have respect for all, you know, perspectives of art. And I don't know why, I questioned myself, like, why are you so self-conscious about it? And then I thought to myself, well, what is that message or statement you're trying to make? And when I think of feminism, I think of feminism in its essence is the respect for diverse women's perspectives, women's experiences, knowledge base. Every woman has a different experience, life experience, right? And so feminism and respect for women's knowledge-based personal experiences, plus, most importantly, empowering a woman to realize their full rights, full potential, full capacity. And what's interesting is that the dream, like quality, and its kind of merging with the female form came a little later on, my next series, which was the different, like the female figures that are currently being exhibited in Artspace, where I kept having dreams about these koi fish next to a female figure and flowing water, and it was like it kept being repeated over and over again, and then I was curious about also that was during a time when I felt like my art was evolving in terms of the female form. You know, like the Rose Revolution painting, the female figures are small and they're actually silhouetted after my own body. And so it was, I was changing my perspective of the female form, and I was doing a lot of just contemplation about how in art history, many female figures are made for the male gaze. Male painters created paintings of female women in the nude for the male gaze. And so I started thinking, like, how do I, as an artist, represent a female figure that is by us, you know, made by women, and also made for the female gaze? And so my female figures started to evolve to become more rounded. Like there are no sharp edges or angles. It's just all smooth and rounded. There aren't details in the fingers, the feet, or even on the face. And it's soft, very soft looking, but also strong. They're very robust. My female figures are robust. They're larger, they're wider, they're thicker, they're voluminous, bodacious, if you would like to call it.
Okay.
So to kind of symbolize how, like, in essence, as if that was my female figure as the symbol of how I perceive feminism, is that we have our soft sides, but you can be soft and strong at the same time. So, like, just because you're feminine and you're soft, it doesn't mean that you can't also be this, you know, strong woman who can set boundaries, a strong woman who looks empowering. And so that is how my female figure kind of eventually evolved.
It must have, you know, it must be like, what is your motivation to keep creating art? Is it just that you're seeing the dreams, or like do you have like a goal as an artist? Like what is your inspiration?
That's a really great question, and I thought about that over and over again. I think about that every day still. What is my motivation and what is my goal? What is, you know, at first it was, I felt like I had to prove myself, like, because everybody saw me as a teacher. And so with the art community, whenever I introduce myself and they, you know, a gallery or someone in the art world, you know, learns that I am an full-time art teacher, elementary art teacher, they don't take me seriously. I will admit that it was like, well, you know, like most artists, a lot of them are, you know, full-time artists and then maybe like part-time something else. And so again, navigating between two different spaces, how do I feel, like why can't I belong in both? And why can't I give 100% and immerse myself in both and be successful in both? Art is a way to connect with others. And so those moments when I'm the giddiest and happiest in terms of creating art or interacting with art is when people connect with my art and tell me that, like, hey, that painting drew me in because this reminded me of this particular, you know, food that I used to eat, or like the cultural aspect of it, or your painting resonated with me because I saw my body reflected in your art. And a lot of, you know, women have, you know, who've bought my female form paintings have said that, you know, there's not much art that represents us in our particular body type, and your art made, I made a connection with it because it felt like I saw myself in your art in a beautiful way. And so that connection, I want to be able to make art to create more connections with people, and to give a little piece of myself that they can also give, and relate to, or give something new to them that they can take and own and relate to on their own. So it's about connecting, building connections with people, bonding. I mean, that is the most like beautiful feeling. And so I definitely want to dig into maybe my cultural identity, my childhood for my newer series, to kind of connect to a larger community of maybe other folks who have had experience of having to live in multiple spaces growing up, and still continue to live in multiple spaces and do it confidently, and feeling, you know, also sometimes it is a struggle, and that is okay. That you're not alone, you know, that having to juggle different spaces.
Yeah, well, I think great art is, you know, so many different things, right? But I think that art ultimately is about a community, right? Like, it's about having, like, you know, if you think about the people who buy an artist's pieces, like, you have your collector community, and like they kind of like all talk to each other sometimes, or they all know each other. And I think, you know, art is about a community.
Right, community building, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I think it's, so far all my paintings have been sold to female, like women, you know, the female community. So I hope that I can continue to build and empower women and the female community. Yeah.
Yeah. And what is your favorite series to date?
Ooh.
I know we've talked about a bunch of them.
Oh, that's a tough one. I have to say, I did have the most fun with my my Sushi Dream series. There's two other ones that was like very meditative. I remember that was before I even got an easel. It was way early on in my 20s in New York, where I just sat on like the hardwood floor, and I had these giant, like, very affordable canvases, and I was had a lot of fun. It was very meditative. There was that repetitiveness, that repetition, really was soothing and calming for me. And there wasn't any like reference, like visual references I was looking at. It was purely, like you said, from my dream. It was like the pure streamline dream to canvas.
Wow.
So I had the most fun. I feel like nowadays with my newer series, I'm getting a little bit more cerebral, and reflective, and like trying to kind of pull from my childhood and memories. And I am fearful that, I think when I first kind of started experimenting with it with the cat painting, that will people be able to relate to that, you know? Because with my female form paintings, a lot of women related to it, but in my Sushi Dream, you know, that one, you know, all people, all genders, all people related to that one. Yeah, food. Someone doesn't love food. Everyone loves food. But the newer series, it's a little bit more intimate, a little bit more personal, and so, but I always I like to add a little dash of humor in my paintings.
Yeah,
so you'll always see that in this new series, and so hopefully the humor is also what unites us, right? Like the cat was what kind of caught your attention too. So I hope that it continues to connect with people who look at my paintings.
I want to represent you. What would you say is like your piece of advice to like a young artist who's creating, you know, that's why we have the Creativo events too. Right. You know, support artists like yourselves, but also to like inspire other people who are creatives, you know, like that 16, 17-year-old Amy. What would you tell that person?
Oh, I love this question. I would say, don't stop creating. You know, wherever you go, I used to travel with a little sketchbook. Constantly produce, no matter if it's not something that you want to show to the world. And second of all, you can exist in multiple spaces. You can juggle multiple different art styles. You know, I feel like in the art world, there's this kind of streamlining, like, you need to stick to your art style. You need to stick to your art style. Who says that you have to? You know, and I'm like, I know I'm like very, like, people hearing this will probably be like, what is she saying? Like, this is blasphemy. But no, like, you know, you don't. Who says you have to? And then third is that stick to it, hustle, go out there, network, you know, apply for every open call that you see that resonates with you. That's what I did, you know, because I did have that fear of, oh no, but like, I'm not like the others. I didn't go to like, you know, a renowned art school. I didn't, you know, I don't have my MFA, you know, and, but hey, I don't have my MFA. I do have a master's in, you know, teaching, but I mean, but, you know, it's because I went and networked, you know. When I was living in Brooklyn, I would, you know, sign up for little art crafts fairs, you know, to sell my prints. But through that, I got an opportunity to paint a mural at this Brooklyn venue that I loved, you know, and so because of the customer I met through that. And so put yourself out there, but I know I'm one of those people who I'm an extroverted introvert, and many artists are like that, or some are just straight introverts. I need my time to myself too, but you know, the social bandwidth that you do have, that you can reserve to get out there, go to social functions, talk to people. Don't be afraid to put yourself in places and spaces that you may not feel comfortable in at first. It'll definitely be a really great way to grow your confidence and also network and get your art out there, essentially, right?
Yeah, absolutely. After doing, you know, a number of different Creativo events, you know, I think people are always interested in the person behind the art. So that's actually really great advice, because people want to meet the artist, and like when they get to know you and like the person behind the painting, they like it more, you know?
Yes.
They like it more. They want to encourage you. I would say that that's like the best advice that you could give anyone, honestly.
Yes.
Just get out there.
Get out there, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's next for you, Amy? I know you're showing at Artspace, Artspace Gallery.
Yes.
So your work is up there. It's showing.
Yes, and then it will be. I'll have, from what, in communication with the gallery recently, I did have a showcase, I think a few months ago, but I will have one before the end of the year again. So I'll definitely keep y'all updated. And so I do have a website. It's amytaiart.com. I also sell some of my art prints on Etsy. And I'm on social media on Instagram, not on Facebook anymore. I'm on Instagram. It's Amy Tai 85. Yeah, and I think oh wait, what's next? I guess, yeah, so what's next? I would say continue to really delve in deep with my new series, and see where that leads. And I think I am going to continue to get out there and network and really get to know the art scene more in LA. And thank you for giving me a platform to get more exposure, make more connections with people through my art. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Oh, well, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Amy.
Oh, thank you.
And we'll be back next time with more good art.